Hello, everybody. Welcome. If you're like me and you already preloaded the Battlefield 6 beta, even though you know you won't be able to play today, and got rid of anything else that's a waste of space on your hard drive, you probably saw, like me, that you can go into the settings. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm just going to highlight some of the more interesting settings for you, whether they be new or maybe just things that I have some tips about. I'd love to know what these settings actually mean if I got it wrong, or if you have your own tips for me, also let me know, because I am not a Battlefield veteran. I'm just going to start off with this so that you guys can be aware of it when you go in to mess with your settings before you start playing, and that is just that the settings are incredibly repetitive, and trying to go through each and every setting, it can be pretty disorienting because several of these settings you'll find throughout every single tab here. The other probably big negative that I should mention, and this is mostly for console players. As you can see, I plug my controller in here. If I go through these menus and everything, let's say I go into controller settings specifically, and let's say I want to change my bindings a little bit, and let's say I want to just go back one menu and that's it. Can't do it if you're on controller. So if you're a console player, I'm sorry. If you don't have a mouse and keyboard you can plug in, it's going to be a real pain if you have to do that, because you can see I'm in the controller mapping right here. But if I press B, like it says in the top left, it will not take me back one menu. It'll take me all the way back to the first tab. So that's a bug. Obviously not a deal breaker for playing the game, but really annoying for controller players. I feel really bad for you guys. Now let's get into some of the more interesting settings that I found. This was probably the first one that I found. It's this interact settings. It's not super specific. It just says set whether interacts are hold or toggle. But you can see up above it has this prioritize, interact, or reload feature, right? So I don't think this is talking about every single interact in the game. If it is, that seems kind of pointless to me. The only interact that I think would be beneficial to make it either hold or toggle would be the reviving interaction, like when you're actually going to get a downed squad mate. And there's only one scenario where I see that being useful. It would be for controller players specifically who don't have any type of pro controller or back button. If this is talking about every interact in the game, obviously just put it on toggle because you want it to interact as quickly as possible. You don't want to have to hold down and have there be a delay to interact with things. But I guess we'll see once this goes live. The next interesting setting is probably this one right here under gameplay in the global tab. It's the capture area outline. So if you've seen any gameplay from the reveal, this just refers to the actual spray painted line is what it looks like around objectives. I think that's a really neat feature. To me, it actually adds to the immersion because it looks very realistic, like someone did just get a can of spray paint and go around in a circle. So if you don't like those though, you can turn those off. Now this section, again, I'm still under the gameplay tab, but virtually every one of these settings right here are also found repetitively in the controller and in the mouse and keyboard setting. This is just another area where they could simplify, either put the just in controller individually and just in mouse and keyboard, or just make them, you have to pick no matter what input you're on, how you want to interact with these certain elements of the game. Because having it in three places gets kind of disorienting when you're trying to go through and you're like, wait, did I already adjust this how I like? Did I not? But there are a couple interesting things that I'm going to point out from these settings. This first one is crouch toggle sprint. Because they have the crouch sprinting mechanic in this game, you can actually choose whether or not hitting the sprint button will stand you up at the same time, or if you will stay crouched, which I think is really cool. By default, it's going to stand you up. They probably chose this as the default setting because that's what most FPS players are used to if they're coming over from other games. But if you're interested in that mechanic, I definitely would switch this to staying crouched, because at the end of the day, it gives you more specific control over your character. This is another feature that by default, it's going to be on, and it's vaulting over with sprint. Basically, you have to be sprinting to actually jump up and over any objects. I'm turning this off just because whether I'm sprinting or not, no matter what my speed is, I want to be able to hit the vault button and just get over the cover. We'll see if that's actually how it works in game. That's what it says in the description. So now this one, well, I actually like the way they put it by default. This is double tapping your crouch button to slide. If you're like me, your first instinct might be to turn this off, but we can see from the footage that you're not going to be able to do things like you are in other FPS games. You're not going to be able to slide cancel like Warzone to get a bunch of speed. You're not going to be able to slide jump like Apex and get speed from it. And most of the time when you slide, it's going to actually slow you down because it's supposed to be a slide into cover. So it probably is advantageous to have it so that when you hit it once, you're just still sprinting full speed, you don't slow down, don't have to go through an animation, anything like that. So I actually like the way they put it, but I just wanted to mention it because that's actually a really cool, interesting setting that they put in. The last interesting mechanic just from this section that I wanted to mention, I could go over this in mouse and keyboard, but I'll just mention it here under the gameplay tab, is the aim sensitivity. I copied over my sensitivity that I use when I play mouse and keyboard, and I was using 7 when I played 2042. And I got that from some sensitivity converter online because my centimeters per 360 that I use in pretty much any game is around 33 centimeters. But part of me is curious to know if they changed how they did this, because you can see over here they have the different DPIs that people typically play at, and then they have the inches over centimeter, right? This right here. And it even says mouse movement distances for 360-degree rotation. So this is really interesting to me. And I want to know if there are any creators from the event that got to play already and they see this video. I want to know if this is what it looks like, because if I want a slower sensitivity, I would give myself something like 47 centimeters or inches. I don't know which one it is. It's kind of ambiguous, but I'm just going to go with centimeters because that's what's typically talked about. So if I wanted a slower sensitivity, I would actually bump this up to 47, whereas if I wanted a faster sensitivity, I would actually just put it on the 33. I don't know. That'd be really interesting if they did that, and I would want more games to do that if I have that right. The next interesting setting that I want to go over is this helicopter control assist. So in previous games, it does just what the description says, makes it so you automatically hover, right? By default, this is off. I had mine turned off when I learned helicopters from 2042, but I'm going to go into the keybinds to show you what they've done differently. They have now Heli Assist Ascend and Heli Assist Descent. So basically when your helicopter is just floating there, if you hit whatever you bind these to, you can just go up and go down. I think what they're doing is just trying to make it more accessible for people who aren't experienced with battlefield vehicles to at least get in and not crash instantly. If this is the only thing they've changed, it's still going to be pretty difficult to control the vehicles. So don't take this as like an end to all your problems if you've struggled to control helicopters in Battlefield in the past, but at least that is something interesting that they added in. Now I'm going to go into the controller tab. The first thing that's missing from these controller settings is a quality of life setting that's been added to more and more modern games, but it's just a little toggle switch somewhere that says switch bumpers and triggers. And it's super nice because lots of people use the bumpers for firing and aiming, but there is no simple switch to do that. You're going to have to go into the presets here, and you might think, oh, maybe it's just on here. If I scroll through the buttons, right, I can use one of these, but no, none of these switch the bumpers or triggers either. So you're going to have to go into editing your keybinds, and you're going to have to switch grenade and toggle camera and your ping button with aiming and firing. At first glance, that doesn't seem too bad. Like, okay, whatever. Apex does the same thing. Not a big deal. But comes a big deal when you now have to go through all 6 possible vehicle settings that you could be in. You're going to have to do that 6 times. So definitely a little rough there. Now, if you want to edit actual controller settings, how it'll feel and perform and interact in the game, you can go into controller settings right here. Again, you're going to have to do it multiple times for each of the categories, whatever you change. But there are actually some good settings in here, and some interesting ones that I want to go over. The first one is this uniform infantry aiming. If you've never played Battlefield games, I'll try to explain this pretty simply. But basically, when you normally use any zoom optics, your sensitivity will slightly be slower. What this does is it attempts to make it so that the actual physical movement, like you moving your stick 1 millimeter, has the same exact distance that you'll cover on the screen, no matter what zoom optic. I actually don't like that. I like that it slows down with higher zoom optics so I can be more precise, like aiming for headshots or really small targets, things like that. They also have this for mouse and keyboard. So for mouse and keyboard players, you can turn it on, experiment with it if that's something you think you'd like. You can also customize every part of aim assist in Battlefield, which other shooters do not have, and I think is actually really cool. Most people are going to want to just leave that at 100, but if you don't like your sensitivity being slowed down or something, or if snapping onto a target actually throws off your aim because you're used to snapping onto targets yourself, then you can turn those down or adjust it however you like. They have response curve settings, right? You do have to make sure you do fire and your aim down sights. Make sure that you get those the same, or else that's probably going to feel really weird for you. And this one right here, the the setting description is actually not correct. So what this actually is basically when you push your stick all the way to the edge, how fast do you want it to start spinning? For me, I like it just to be the max, because if I want to do a 180, I want it to be moving as fast as possible. If you're a Battlefield veteran, you can pick from older games. You can see here it has a bunch of older games, but I bumped it up to 100 because whatever is fastest for me. This is the next interesting setting. This actually lets you make it so that the same amount of movement up and down equals the same amount of speed horizontally that you would get. I like this because I come from Apex Legends mostly, and I play with ALC settings where you get to pick specifically what speed you play at. You can make them match for vertical and horizontal. So I thought this is really cool they put this in here, because I'm definitely going to make it match. And if you're like me, here you go. Here's the last set of interesting settings for controller that I wanted to touch on. And it's these two sections, this joystick section and this controller tuning section. There's some redundancy here, and on this joystick section, you should just avoid altogether. Because you would think, oh, this is where I go in and I can set my dead zones, right? Not exactly. You can set dead zones. This does not split it up by stick, which if you're experienced at all in FPS games on a controller, you do not want those to be the same. You want them to have different dead zones. But if you go back and you go down to the controller tuning section, now it lets you pick left versus right stick. In my mind, super weird that they don't just have the left stick and the right stick under the joystick section. I don't get it, but if you're confused trying to find them, that's where it is. Also, if you're a gyro player, I know there are quite a few diehard gyro players out there, it's also under controller tuning. Now, mouse and keyboard, most of these settings are going to be pretty self-explanatory. It does have a little bit of the annoyance that is the same from the controller setting, where if you change one bind in your infantry keybinds, you're going to have to go back through and do this for each of the other ones. Like, for example, if I was to, in my infantry keybinds, make my interact and enter and exit vehicles F, you'll switch it here in your infantry keybinds and think everything is good, but then you'll go into the game, and when you're in your vehicle, you'll have to hit E to exit. If you switch something like that in your infantry settings, be sure to go through and modify it for each of the other groups of keybinds as well. There wasn't really a whole lot other than that was new or interesting with mouse and keyboard settings. They do have the uniform aiming if you want to turn that on for different zooms. By default, I think it is on, so if you don't like that, be sure to go in and turn it off. Now, actually getting into the graphics settings, if you're on console, you probably won't have any of these settings. You'll probably have maybe a field of view slider and maybe a performance preset, and that's probably all you'll have. If you're on PC, some of the more interesting ones is first this anti-aliasing. You can actually turn it off, which if you come from games that do have the ability to turn that off, it's kind of nice because it does lower your input lag. It does say experimental here, so I'm not sure how good the edges in the game will look. If you're used to it, like when I play Apex Legends, I have it off, then there you go. I'm probably going to run the FSR because I have an AMD graphics card and it does have frame generation. I'm sure it has the same things for NVIDIA DLSS. The only other interesting part of the graphics settings that I wanted to go into was these icon and HUD settings, just because one of the things that I didn't really enjoy when I was playing other Battlefield games was the objective icons, the friendly icons. Even when I was watching the creators at the reveal event play, it just is so much visual clutter with so many icons on your screen. It's really hard to see where enemies are. So I was actually really happy to see these in here. You change how easily it is to see through those icons. This section right here will let you change how see-through they are if they're close to your crosshair or where you're trying to aim. I just wanted to be able to see more of what was actually in front of me on my entire screen, so I just went below that, and you can change all of them individually from there. As far as the audio settings, there's only one thing that I'm going to point out, just because these are all pretty standard. I, again, am not a Battlefield vet, but I have seen from other Battlefield vets that war tapes is the way to go. Never tried it before in the other games, but I'm going to try it out in this one and see how it goes. The only other setting that I thought was cool is this tinnitus sound effect. You can change the volume of it, and you can change the actual pitch of it. It would be nice if there was a little like test button next to this, so I know what this 20,000, I'm guessing, hertz sounds like, and then be able to adjust from there just in the settings without actually having to be in a game experiencing the tinnitus sound. But it's cool that they let you change it. Now for the system tab, if you are a streamer, you can enable streamer mode and anonymous mode so that you're less likely to get stream sniped. This last tab, extras, is just where you can read about your user agreement, so you can see exactly how EA is selling your information for money. Those are all the interesting settings that I found. Obviously, there are quite a few negatives that I touched on, but just because I'm highlighting them here, don't view this as doom and gloom for the entire game or anything like that. I honestly still think the game is going to be great. It's just a menu problem, and honestly, lots of games have issues getting really good settings menus. The only two tips I would give, one I've kind of already said, but make it so that each setting only appears once. I don't care which menu it's in or where it's at specifically, just make it only appear once. Because if you're someone like me who's experienced playing games and you know how to just open up your settings and go through them like a list and change them to exactly what you want, having the list repeat itself multiple times is very jarring. And two, the only other tip that I would give has to go back to Battlefield's controller feel. I've played most every big shooter that's ever been made, and Battlefield definitely has, in my opinion, always been the one that's felt the worst to play on controller. It's obviously too late to go and revamp how controllers interact with the game itself, but at least with the settings side of things, and when it comes to things like sensitivity and response curves and dead zones, things like that, just take Apex Legends controller settings and copy and paste them. Apex Legends has by far the best feel on a controller over any shooter, so a good start would probably be putting those settings in here. Just make a simple response curve, a simple sensitivity, and then throw on the advanced look controls. It doesn't just let you pick an arbitrary number for your sensitivity, you actually pick the maximum speed in degrees per second that your character will turn and an exact percentage of your dead zone. So there's a lot to it that makes it really nice for experienced controller players to fine tune, and it could be something that, if standardized, is super nice so every FPS game feels exactly how you want it. Hopefully that makes sense. Honestly, as I've been recording this, lots of these thoughts to me have sounded really nerdy and like they don't matter that much. But if you enjoyed this, got something out of it, give me a like and a follow. I'll be making more content like this as I find things interesting in Battlefield and other shooters. But thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.